On behalf of the staff, I'd like to welcome you to the Mary Field and Vincent D.P. Goubeau lectures on women and the church. This lecture was created to celebrate the contributions of women to church and society. Tonight, Sister Joan Dawber, our speaker, was born in Manchester, England. After moving to the United States, she received a Master of Arts in Theology from St. John's University in Queens, New York, and a Master in Pastoral Studies from Loyola University in Chicago. Sister Joan has been a member of the Sisters of Charity of Halifax for 30 years. She worked in the Diocese of Brooklyn and Queens, New York as a pastoral associate for 20 years. During this period, she ministered in several parishes, providing services to parishioners and leadership to the surrounding community, especially attentive to the poor and immigrant populations in these areas. In 2006, she began to work full-time in an initiative to combat human trafficking. In March 2007, she incorporated LifeWay Network as a nonprofit collaborating to combat human trafficking. She's currently the executive director and works in cooperation with others to educate and to create safe homes for victims of trafficking. She is the recent former co-chair of the New York Coalition of Religious Congregations Stop Trafficking in Persons, with a membership of 39 religious congregations, and also serves on the Sisters of Charity Global Concerns Resources Team with a specific focus on human trafficking. In March 2012, LifeWay House, a long-term safe house, opened its doors, providing a safe, secure environment for 5 women survivors of trafficking. This program supports each woman's journey towards independent living and a hope-filled future. In September 2014, Sister Joan's work was recognized by St. John's University when she received the Caritas Medal. She was also recognized for her work in the book, If Nuns Ruled the World. Joan and the LifeWay Network have membership in over 9 coalitions working together to bring an end to human trafficking. And with that, I welcome her as she addresses a topic of a modern response to modern-day slavery.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted and honored to be here this evening as part of the fall lecture series, and in particular to offer the Field and DePaul Goubeau lecture. I would like to tell you the story of LifeWay Network, who we are and our response to human trafficking, or what is more correctly named modern-day slavery. The questions I will address are, how did I personally get involved in responding to modern-day slavery? What exactly is it? What is its impact in the world? Did I do this alone? If not, who are the other characters in this story? What are the elements of LifeWay Network's ministry? And if we have time, how can others join the story and work with us to bring an end to modern-day slavery? And as we begin, a note about slavery as we start. As you know, in 2013, we marked the 150th year since President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation as an executive order on January the 21st, 1863. Earlier in England, William Wilberforce headed the campaign against the British slave trade for 26 years. And finally, in 1833, the Slavery Abolition Act was passed, abolishing slavery in most of the British Empire. We would think that given the passage of these 2 great acts to abolish slavery, that now in the 21st century, there would be no more slavery in the world. I am sorry to tell you the opposite is true. There are more slaves in the world today than at any time in history. It is reported that there is a staggering 21 million slaves worldwide. Slavery in the United States did not end with Emancipation Proclamation. Modern-day slavery is real. And so my story. How did I get involved? I could say once upon a time, as I begin this story, or more appropriately, in the beginning was the Word. It all began rooted in my own faith, in the charism of my religious congregation, and in my desire to serve the poor. From Luke's Gospel, I hear the words, "The Spirit of the Lord has been given to me, for he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor and to proclaim liberty to captives." The word came to me in the silence of my prayer. It tugged at me to live more authentically with and for others, to open myself to a deeper relationship with the person of Jesus and his mission to bring about life. This is the context that would move me in the direction of human trafficking, modern-day slavery, to work to bring life to women who were held captive and stripped of their humanity. It was this desire that eventually opened me to the call for action from the Union of International Superiors General. This group of leaders gathers in Rome every 4 years to discuss the needs of the world from the perspective of their own religious congregations. In 2001, 800 congregations of women religious, representing over 1 million members, ratified a declaration of human trafficking. The declaration reads in part, "Sent to be a living presence of the tenderness and mercy of God in our wounded world, publicly we declare our determination to work in solidarity with one another, within our own religious communities and in the countries in which we are located, to address insistently and at every level the abuse and sexual exploitation of women and children, and with a particular attention to the trafficking of women." We women religious were invited to read and pray and learn about human trafficking. Believe it or not, initially, it repulsed me. I decided I didn't want to know anything more about it. The little I knew caused me great dread. I would simply pray about it. And as you know, often it is we, the person praying, who begins to be changed. And that's what happened to me. Articles seemed to come to me, and I began to grow more and more aware of and understand and embrace the stark reality of human trafficking, slowly but surely. A significant turning point was a Sunday Times Magazine article published in January of 2004 called "The Girl Next Door" by Peter Landesman. It was about young American women being trafficked into the United States and ending up in Queens, that not far from where I lived. This really brought it home figuratively and literally. I knew I had to begin to act, to do something about it. So that briefly is how I got involved in human trafficking. So the question is, what is human trafficking and what is its impact in the world? Here are a couple of definitions. From the Intercommunity Center for Peace and Justice, human trafficking is considered modern-day slavery. It is an invisible trade in human beings, our brothers and sisters, who are bought and sold each day. They are the world's poor in search of a better life. They are deceived, entrapped, taken from their homes to unknown places, robbed of their dignity. They become human cargo, used in the machinery of economic globalization. I like this definition because it captures simply what is happening. A second definition is an accepted international, more legal definition of trafficking, and it is found in the UN Protocol to prevent, suppress, punish trafficking in persons, especially women and children. In this definition, you will hear such words as force, fraud, coercion, deception, abduction, recruitment, transfer, receiving payment, and more. All these actions are carried out by the trafficker and make up the web of trafficking, with the specific purpose of gaining control over another person, for the sole intention of exploitation. The United States federal definition of trafficking agrees that there are commonly three elements in human trafficking: the process, the means, and the end. The process: the victim is recruited, transferred, harbored, obtained, or moved. The question is here, who brought you and how? Trust is destroyed at this stage. An individual who is looking to come to the United States or is looking to better themselves in some way may be in touch with a relative or a friend or somebody who agrees to help them. And that person agrees to move them to wherever it is they're going and work with them. And then we find that what they promised them, the job or the schooling that they said that they were going to get, is not given to them. So that person who is the family member or the friend or the trusted person has now betrayed them. And so from that moment on, that trust is actually really, really eroded. The second is the means. The trafficker uses force, fraud, as we just mentioned, coercion, abduction, threat, deception, or the abuse of power to gain control over the victim. This is a critical aspect. The victim feels they clearly cannot leave. This is exploitation, and it is already happening. Lots of people will see pictures of women that they think are in human trafficking, and they're usually chained up or something like that. That's not always what is happening to a person who's been trafficked. It's really the chain around the brain. I know where your family is. I know where your mother lives. I know. So that kind of behavior is what holds the trafficked person and actually starts the exploitation. The third, the end. The victim is exploited for forced labor, involuntary servitude, slavery, debt bondage, or commercial sex acts. Others are clearly gaining economically from the victim's labor. A couple of examples for that. A child sold for sex out of a trailer in a Walmart parking lot. A hotel maid who was promised work in the US but had her passport taken away and is forced to work 18 hours a day with no breaks. An American woman sold in brothels around New York City. a man coerced to work on a farm to harvest seasonal crops in upstate New York. Let me tell you a brief story. Deborah, and that's not her real name, the first survivor I met who came to live with us, was a survivor of labor trafficking. She came to us from Africa with the promise of education. Immediately after she arrived, her documents were taken from her, and she was transported to a house to be forced into domestic slavery. She worked every day from before 5 a.m. until after midnight. She cared for the children and kept the house. Her own family had no idea where she was. She was not allowed out of the house and was abused severely. She prepared the food and was punished if she ate any of it. When given food, she had to sit in a corner on the floor. She was held captive for over 6 years. It was a neighbor who finally assisted her and rescued her. And there's a long story about her rescue, but we don't have time for that right now. Some statistics. Human trafficking is the second largest criminal industry in the world and the fastest growing one. When we look at the trafficking of guns or we look at the trafficking of drugs, drugs is the highest one at this point in time. You use a drug and it's used, it's finished, it's over with. You sell a person and you use a person over and over and over again. That's why it's a very lucrative, incredibly lucrative business. The IOL reports that the yearly profits generated by the human trafficking industry globally are $150 billion. More than 80% of trafficking victims are female, and over 50% are children. These numbers are somewhat estimated because trafficking is a very hidden crime. It's in plain sight, but you don't know it's there. Because this is such a huge criminal business, we can become overwhelmed, wondering how can we make an impact. It is clear that no one person, no organization, no law enforcement, or any other individual agency can work on this alone. Working together with effective collaboration is essential. And so a word about collaboration. You may have seen our logo, LifeWay Network, and it reads, "Collaborating to combat human trafficking." The word collaborate is most important. When people and organizations come together with a shared vision and diverse gifts, we can create something that is greater than the sum of the individual parts. Outcomes of true collaboration express the power of interconnectedness and of interdependence. We understand today so much more about the degree of connectedness and connections among and within all things, including the natural world. We find ourselves in a different phase of building church and community than the institutions of old that stood on their own natural self-sufficiency. Today, there are broader networks, fewer boundaries in the world that explodes with diversity and challenges us to see that as a strength. I see this model as part of the modern response and as a path forward in our fractured world. The first steps towards LifeWay Network began in 2005 when I felt the need to leave my ministry as pastoral associate in the Diocese of Brooklyn and Queens and to begin a collaborative initiative around human trafficking. The planets aligned. At that time, the Migration and Refugee Service of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops had already received government funding to set up structures to support those rescued and identified as victims of trafficking. In June of that year, MRS initiated a landmark gathering of U.S. women religious around human trafficking. We gathered for a weekend to learn from one another and move towards action together. Following this meeting, I was one of 5 sisters from the New York area who met again with the hope of taking concrete action on a local level. This led to the initial stages of forming the New York Coalition of Religious Congregations Stop Trafficking in Persons. With this support and a grant from my congregation, the Sisters of Charity of Halifax, I set up a one-room office with a computer and began to create a non-for-profit. It was a corporation that in 2007 would be known as LifeWay Network. Within my own congregation, I began working with the Sisters of Charity Global Concerns Resource Team. 3 of us planned, prepared, and delivered education days for our sisters and colleagues throughout Canada and the United States entitled Root Causes of Poverty and the Issue of Human Trafficking. We needed to keep educating ourselves, our sisters, and spreading awareness about this issue. This then was the beginning of LifeWay Network's education program, which today aims to inspire its audiences to become well informed on the issue of modern-day slavery. We seek to bring a change in mindset that results in action and engagement in the community. Broadening the understanding of human trafficking, especially locally, creates possibilities for prevention of at-risk populations and identification of possible victims. We provide educational workshops to universities, community groups, schools, parishes, service providers, and more, and have interacted with and educated over 10,000 persons since the beginning. This is a quote from a survivor. "Human trafficking is so hidden, you don't know what you're fighting. The victims are so scared, they're not going to tell you what's happening to them. The most important thing is constant education of people. There is help out there, but the victims don't know it." As a response to this survivor and all other survivors, LifeWay Network remains committed to raising public awareness as an essential first step to ending this crime against humanity. That was the education program. In addition to the education program, we identified the need for safe housing, a place where women who had experienced the horror of trafficking would be safe and where they could once again know that they were strong, connected, and free human beings. At the coalition level, we established a safe housing committee and invited women religious in New York who might have a spare room in their local community to consider becoming an emergency safe space for an overnight or a weekend. Within 2 years, we had established 3 locations and at the same time partnered with social service providers who would make the referrals and provide the case management services. This was the beginning of LifeWay Network's Safe Housing Program, which coordinated these services. It soon became clear to all that this was not sufficient either in number of beds or duration of stay. We needed a house with the possibility of a long-term stay to provide stability for a period of at least 1 year. We began a research project with Hofstra University between 2010 and 2011 to answer the question around safe housing and safe housing services. And it confirmed our understanding of the need in the New York metropolitan area. We discovered most trafficking survivors need long-term safe housing coupled with the provision of a wide array of services. That research is on our website if anybody is interested in looking at it. Armed with this research, we began writing up a business plan and continued partnering with members of the coalition to find our first long-term safe house. The collaborative and supportive spirit of the coalition was critical to this phase of our growth, beginning with offering rooms in their own homes for emergency safe spaces. Religious congregations further embraced this ministry by providing initial seed funding to open the first long-term safe house, and over 20 sisters volunteered and were trained in trauma-informed care. What are the elements of LifeWay Network's safe housing ministry? Since LifeWay Network Safe Housing Ministry program began in 2009 with short-term emergency beds, the program has expanded and grown. We now have 2 long-term safe houses in which a woman can reside for up to 1 year. We operate a 3rd long-term safe house in partnership with Covenant House, New York, that provides 7 long-term beds where women can reside up to 1.5 years, and includes 2 beds designated for a mother and child. Altogether, we provide over 20 beds designated specifically for women who have suffered from labor or sex trafficking. Since the opening of the Safe Housing Program, we have had the privilege of welcoming over 61 women from 28 different countries into a home they can call their own. The Safe Housing community living model provides a true home for both domestic and foreign-born survivors, age 18 and above, as she journeys towards the goals of independent living. What sets LifeWay Network apart is our commitment to an intentional community living model with a 24/7 live-in host community of 3 women religious. The host community provides a stable, loving environment for the survivor to heal and grow. This community living model is really the core of the Safe Housing Program. This is an essential part of our Safe Housing Program and draws on the wisdom of our tradition. Even though forming community is ancient in its origin, it is part of our modern response to the realization that people are longing for connection and belonging in the midst of so many messages that direct us towards radical independence and the false sense that we are either too important or not important enough. There is a deep need of an appropriate sense of self in relationship to others, an understanding of the inherent dignity of the human person, and the belief that the person exists in relationship. This is deeply connected to how I know God as a community of persons in the Trinity. We are not intended to live in isolation, to be alone. In fact, it is community where life is deepened and lived in integrity and truth. This foundational importance of community leads us to create a true home for the survivors we serve, and goes beyond offering shelter and meals. Each woman is welcomed into a caring, supportive, and secure environment that helps her to begin to recover from trauma and isolation. From the isolation she has suffered, and regain her sense of self-worth. Community is essential for the full flourishing of the human person. Our survivors say it best. For the first time, I was able to sleep deeply. Or, you are giving me the opportunity to spread my wings and fly. That one person who said, you're giving me the opportunity to sleep deeply, she was a victim of sex trafficking and could never be secure whenever she went to sleep, that she wouldn't be called upon. We offer holistic services. In addition to a safe community, the survivor is in need of a multidisciplinary set of services. Women are referred to LifeWay by service providers or law enforcement who dedicate a case manager to each woman. Collaborating with these service providers, LifeWay is able to connect the women survivor to rehabilitative services, such as legal aid, translation, interpretation services, mental health care, and job skills training. Each woman is unique, and her individual needs are unique to her. It is important to have a holistic approach that includes physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, intellectual, and creative aspects, and addresses the whole person. In order to enhance her quality of life and re-immersion into society. Volunteers and staff, social worker and a house manager that we have in both houses and all the houses, also work with the survivor around tutoring, mentoring, transportation to appointments, aid navigating the New York City system, assistance with essential living skills such as social, financial literacy, resume building, apartment hunting, and cooking. The women participate in various artistic and therapeutic opportunities such as exercising, cultural expansion, seasonal activities such as fall and winter arts and crafts and decorating, as well as gardening in the summer. We have a nice garden. These community activities open the survivor to recognize their own special gifts and creativity and bring about new life and hope in the future. Finally, as I bring these remarks to a close, I am pleased to let you know that we have been doing this work for 10 years and will be celebrating this milestone in 2017. As I reflect back over these years with you, I am so aware this is certainly not my work. Without the power of the word in prayer, continually supporting and moving this ministry forward, I could not have sustained these 10 years. I have believed from the beginning this is not about me, and it is not about me in any way, but it is God's way. When things get tough, and they do, I just keep going, knowing it was meant to be. If it was meant to be, it would be. And it would be with God's grace. My hope for the future is that we will continue to meet the needs of women survivors who will grow strong, connected, and free, and join LifeWay Network's staff so that all together we will continue working to bring an end to human trafficking. Thank you. I don't know where I am on time, so... That's done through working with the social worker who is in the house and the case manager who is outside the house. So they work together on that. And what we try and do is to make sure that the woman herself has some level of education, that she can earn a living before she leaves us, and that she then will be able to live independently in another kind of safe space. It can be a residence. We have a terrific residence in New York City that works with women, and that we have been able to put one or two of our women in there. Some then return to some family members if they have family members around. So it depends on the person themselves. But yeah, we just move them along. And sometimes I have to say, a year is not always enough. Yeah. I don't believe there are more supports for children who've been trafficked. The trafficked children, there could be at any one time over 500,000 children vulnerable to human trafficking in the United States alone. Children who have come across the borders from other countries, the unaccompanied minors, there are some programs for those, but it's social services that actually will work with those children. My sense, and the sense of many people, is that the particular social service agencies need a lot of education around how to work with victims of human trafficking that are children. Yes. Trafficking people don't necessarily self-identify as trafficking. In fact, they don't think they're trafficked. They think they've made a very poor choice and made a very bad mistake because of that manipulation that has taken place in them. But when we receive victims of trafficking through those social service agencies who then will, who need housing for the victim, or through law enforcement who have done a raid and actually need housing. In fact, we're looking to have somebody move in tomorrow to one of our houses from a raid. That's how we get them. That's how they come to us. They also can come through their friends who actually then may know that this person is being trafficked as well as I was trafficked, and then talk to them about that. But they usually go first of all to the service provider, and then with the assistance of the service provider, they come to us in the safe housing. They can't, nobody can just come to the safe houses. People don't know where those are. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Yes. Wonderful. Right. Yes. Yes. I think the very fact that we have a safe house and that women in that safe house have now know that they are trafficked in some way, they understand that they are trafficked. I think when a newer member comes into the house, that's helpful that the other women are there to talk with them and to be with them and to assist them. If they don't want to come to the house, that's their choice. Absolutely, they're free to choose whether or not they want to come and be with us. I think anybody who has gone through the horror of human trafficking and the trauma of human trafficking will be certainly the trauma itself will create all kinds of behaviors that are really not behaviors that you see normally. Those behaviors they surface very quickly. They surface at different times, and you don't know where they're coming from or why or what it is. But I do believe that it's really tough. It's so tough. I hear you. It's so tough. Each one is so individual, aren't they? And so you've got to deal with the individual person. You can't say this is for everybody. Yes. Yes. Yeah, I think it affects our perception of trafficking. President Obama, I think in 2012, was the one who actually came out and said, we have to call it what it really is. It is modern day slavery. So we have been working with that understanding that it has those components to it for sure. But we look at human trafficking, and I think the laws still talk about human trafficking and in some cases modern day slavery. So it's coming. Thank you.
So now you have a chance to know about what would happen if nuns actually did rule the world. Right? And there's information about LifeWay Network, and the book is available in the hallway, as well as coffee and more wine, I believe. Please, again, thank you, Joan.
Thank you. You're very welcome. Thank you.